The Kansas City Chiefs just got a very interesting rumor from Mitch Holthus, potentially teasing a return for cornerback Jaylen Watson. You guys are listening to the KC Sports Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy. Once again, I have the pleasure to be joined by my good friend Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And together, we're going to break down the latest rumor calling for Jaylen Watson to potentially return this season for the Kansas City Chiefs. So Mitch Holthus went on 96.5 The Fan earlier on Monday, and he said this: the Chiefs could go into Pittsburgh with that 1 seed locked up. There is that chance. That would be best case. If the Chiefs can get the bye, they will go 24 days and play one game. And that one game against Denver might be a replication of it was last year against the Chargers. Don't talk about rust versus rest, not a team that's played 7 years in 6. It would be like a brand new training camp. You're going to be able to get Hollywood Brown back, maybe Jaylen Watson to get the bye by the end of the Houston game on December 21st would be an early Christmas present. So Chiefs Kingdom, Mitch Holthus, someone who is very tapped in to the Kansas City Chiefs, said that you could maybe get Jaylen Watson back for the playoffs, which is just a ridiculous, rumor to throw out there if there's no validity to it at all, because I think that Mitch Holthus is not in the business of spreading false rumors. And so if he thinks there's a chance that cornerback Jaylen Watson could come back at some point this season, I think there is some validity to that. But Josh, what do you think? Do you think there's any chance that we see Jaylen Watson suit up for the Chiefs again in the playoffs?
There's a slight chance. Basically, what Mitch Holthus is conveying, I think, is so you're saying there's a chance. Those are the odds. Like, I can't put a number on it, but I'm just saying there's a chance. You could see Jaylen Watson back for the Kansas City Chiefs in the postseason. And Mitch Holthus was kind of talking about that, in response to the Kansas City Chiefs locking up a bye week before the playoffs. And that's going to be a big part of it, whether or not I think he comes back, because the Chiefs are going to need that bye week to get him incorporated if there's going to be any chance of him coming back.
Yeah, and listen, Jaylen Watson has not helped tone these rumors down. He's been adding fuel to that fire. 6 days ago, he tweeted out, "Never count me out." And he's honestly been tweeting stuff like that out for the past month and a half, basically saying that don't count him out for the rest of the season, that there's potentially a chance that he does come back later on in the year. But Josh, I think that breaking down that Mitch Holthus quote, he's not saying that he's going to come back. He's just saying there's a chance. Maybe Jaylen Watson comes back for the playoffs. But again, referencing that quote, I think it highly depends on if the Chiefs get that number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs and get that bye week. Because we're kind of doing the math on your channel. Isaiah Pacheco, who had kind of a similar injury in week 2 against the Bengals, he was out until like week 13 against the Raiders. And so that's a long time. But Jaylen Watson got hurt against the 49ers, and then they had that bye week. And so we had that extra week to kind of figure out what was going on and start the recovery process. But Jaylen Watson broke his ankle. And so that's going to be a tough injury for a defensive back to come back from. But the timeline might fit a postseason return if the Chiefs do get that bye week. And so I'm not saying that Jaylen Watson is going to, come back in the playoffs, but I think having that chance, having that optimism is a very exciting thing.
Yeah, and I think that, of course, the longer that the Chiefs are alive in the postseason, the more likely it is that he could come back. The odds increase each week that you keep your season alive, to where he may be able to return for, let's say, the Super Bowl if the Kansas City Chiefs make it. Maybe he is not back by, the first week of the playoffs, but he could maybe still be back by the Super Bowl, because, again, you mentioned the timeline that Isaiah Pacheco was on. If Jaylen Watson was, anywhere in that ballpark, then he could potentially return for that Super Bowl. I don't see why that's not a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not in that Chiefs training room talking to Jaylen Watson on the daily or anything like that. But Jaylen Watson himself seems pretty confident that he could come back. So who knows?
I'm the last person you should ever take medical advice from, but I do think that if you know how the Chiefs operate in terms of bringing guys back from injury, they're normally pretty cautious. But as you've seen with Jaylen Watson getting hurt, the Chiefs are desperate for a number 2 cornerback. You saw that when they went out and signed a guy out of retirement in Steven Nelson yesterday. And so while I think they'd be cautious and cautious and careful with Jaylen Watson, if there's a shot that he can play in the playoffs, you best believe that he will be suiting up in the playoffs, but they're not going to rush him back to the point where it's unsafe and unhealthy and, risking his future career down the stretch. So I don't think they're going to do that. But I think if you just take what Jaylen Watson has said about his own situation on Twitter, pairing that with what Mitch Holthus said, that he maybe could return at some point this season, I think there's definitely a chance. This isn't a sure thing, but injuries are never a sure thing. And so the fact that there is a chance, gives Chiefs fans some hope that Jaylen Watson could be back on this team in January, maybe February, if he comes back for that Super Bowl. But Josh, how do you think the Chiefs would utilize a Jaylen Watson who'd be coming off of a broken ankle in this defense?
It's tough, man, because it's such a tricky injury to come back from, especially for a DB who you want, to be able to run full speed. And that's a big part of it. And they're going to be covering some fast and physical receivers. You'd have to work them in. It'll take a while, but the Chiefs have kind of shown already that they'll throw guys out there that maybe aren't 100% ready because they're that desperate at the position, and just, work out those kinks on the field. DJ Humphries is an example. He may not quite have been ready. And as we saw, he got injured in that game, but the Chiefs are like, hey, guess what? You're playing in this game. We need you. And we've seen the Chiefs are pretty desperate at cornerback at this point. That's why they are signing Steven Nelson out of retirement. So, yeah, trial by fire, kind of like you mentioned about Wanya Morris last night during our post game.
Listen, Wanya Morris is going to have to be a better left tackle, especially with DJ Humphries' health being an uncertainty, and maybe he doesn't come back, because of all the issues that he's got with his legs. First an ACL tear last year, now a hamstring problem. So it's like you can't really bank on DJ Humphries being fully healthy, next week or in the playoffs. So Wanya Morris is going to have to take more of a role, but kind of combining the two situations, they're very similar, because if the Chiefs think that Jaylen Watson would be better than a guy coming out of retirement in Steven Nelson, matchup-wise in a playoff game, I'm going to trust their judgment. And I think that if Watson is good and healthy to go, they're going to put him out there and they're going to let him go try to go accomplish that mission of locking down whoever they throw on him, because you've seen over the past 5 or 6 weeks since he's been hurt, that number 2 spot has been a problem. We've talked about, the EPA. It's gone way down. And so Jaylen Watson, even an injured Jaylen Watson, would be better than I think a Joshua Williams or a Najee Johnson, because he really elevated his game this year, winning that number 2 spot out of camp. But before we go any further, guys, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this channel all football season long. Welcome to the Rice Real Estate Group, Kansas City's premier partner in real estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or investing, you will receive a tailored experience designed just for you. Specializing in residential, commercial, and investment properties, the dedicated team over at the Rice Real Estate Group helps guide you through every transaction, including navigating those short, complex sales. With a commitment to personal one-on-one service, they will ensure that you are supported every step of the way. You can achieve your goals with expertise, care, and a customized approach that truly makes a difference. Ready to make your next move? The Rice Real Estate Group is here to make it happen. For more information, call 816-819-9333. Huge shout out to the Rice Real Estate Group for sponsoring this channel all football season long. But Josh, we're going to have a interesting question for you. So we can't really diagnose an injury. We're not doctors. We don't do that here on this channel. But I want you to give me a percentage of the likelihood that Jaylen Watson comes back at any point this season. I'm not calling for the regular season or, in the divisional round or the AFC Championship game, but do you think that he will be back at some point this season? And what percentage would you say that's possible?
Right now, I'd say there's about a 20% chance, which is a little bit more than some may realize. That gives them about, if you were to flip a coin a couple of times, 4 times.
1 in 5.
Yeah. 1 in 5 chance. So That said, sometimes the recovery is up to the player, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize. For some players, it may be a little bit easier, and I'm not accusing anyone of this, but I can tell you that it's probably happened before. A player may be on the shelf and say, "Hey, I'm still getting paid. I haven't played, and I've kind of been on my couch at home for most of the season. This is kind of nice. I'm not going to try that hard to come back this year. I'm just going to get ready for next year." But sometimes you see guys really attack their rehab like Charles Omenihu did. And he was like tweeting about it every day. He's like, "I'm going to come back stronger than ever. Y'all are doubting me." He almost kind of was making enemies for himself just to like create some sort of motivation. It's like, dude, we all believe in you. You don't have to convince anyone. But I mean, he really worked hard to come back, and he returned sooner than most probably would have. And he also played more in his first game back than he was actually expected to play. I think they went into that game having him on a snap count, and he's like, "Nah, F this, like I'm getting in this game." And he actually played well. And Jaylen Watson seems to share a similar mentality. I mean, he's constantly tweeting about, not counting him out, and he still has a chance. And so with the recovery sometimes being up to the player, I think Jaylen Watson is one of those guys that he's going to work really hard to try to come back this year, and that's going to be a large part in determining that.
Well, I think he's already done a lot of work to come back this season. And I think that the Twitter, you can't take it for gospel because players oftentimes will maybe tease the fans of coming back a little sooner than actually expected. But if I was to give a percentage chance on the likelihood that Jaylen Watson comes back at any point this season, I'm still going to say 10 to 15%. And that's being generous because we got that report a couple months ago from Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com, basically saying the Chiefs front office and organization was not banking on Jaylen Watson coming back at any point this season. And so if they initially had that viewpoint and perspective, listen, there's only so much rehab you can do and so much, preparedness that you can to do on that side. And at the end of the day, a broken ankle is a broken ankle. And so the Chiefs might decide that it's not wise to rush him back, especially after signing Steven Nelson. And so I think the 10 to 15% range is probably a pretty good, accurate percentage to have. 20% I think is very generous, optimistic. But if there's anybody that can come back from this injury as quickly, it's someone as motivated as Jaylen Watson. So Josh, my final question for you. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think that just about covers it. I think a lot of it is going to be up to Jaylen Watson. And you mentioned the Chiefs not banking on it, but that's also not saying that he's for sure 100% done. They're just not banking on it, which is also why they signed Steven Nelson, because you have to have a contingency plan. It would be stupid not to, but that doesn't 100% rule him out for the rest of the year.
Very true. Not banking does not mean that he's not going to play again. And this was also a couple months ago. So maybe that has kind of changed things and maybe he's made great progress in his recovery. But who knows? We're only going to know, if he's playing at some point this season, if things continue to progress very, very nicely. But Josh, That's all we have for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe for more of the best Daily Chiefs content on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at KC Sports Report. Also, go check out Josh's stuff. The links to all of that will be in the description below. Show Me Football on YouTube. Also, go check out his stuff on arrowheadaddict.com. Josh, am I missing anything?
No, I don't know if you can hear, though, right now, Michael. There is a reveille going on in the background since I do live on a military base. I don't know if you guys can hear it at all, but I think that's a nice close to the video. Yeah.
Yeah, so, is it taps?
Yeah, taps.
Well, that's all we got for this video. That's the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe. As always, thank you guys for watching. Go Chiefs.